I, 29M, lost my fiancé 4 years ago in a car accident. He and I were both 25 at the time and had been together since we were 19. If soulmates are real, he was mine. He was stubborn, he preferred a way earlier bedtime than I did, and was a major homebuddy, and I loved all of it. He would stay up with me until he was sure I fell asleep, and weekly movie theater outings, planned by him, became a thing like a month into us meeting. I am a fundamentally different person both because I met him and because of my grief. I was shown what real love and effort and care feels like. I also don't talk about him. I go to therapy once a week. Otherwise, it's silence on that topic from me. He lives on in me in the ways I try to emulate him. I practice the patience he had that I always struggled to find. I go after career-related opportunities that scare me because I know he would encourage me to. Sometimes I let myself stay in bed because I know he'd be gentle with me and let me do that too. But I don't talk about him, and I probably never will. I'll make the occasional "oh, X would have loved this" comment when I'm with friends who knew him well. With strangers, nothing. My friends and family respect that as well. I'm engaged again. My fiancé, 31F, obviously knows I was engaged before. I pretty much told her, my last partner passed away and I don't talk about it. I don't use social media in really any capacity anymore, but she happened to stumble upon an old Instagram profile of mine recently and saw him heavily featured. This led to her accusing me of purposefully keeping this from her. I don't really see why his gender matters, and I told her so. She said I've broken her trust. Times like these are when I long for the life I was living before. But grief fucked up my brain, so I'm not sure if I'm being insensitive. Edit. She knew I am bisexual. The only thing she didn't know was that my fiancé was a man. Relevant comments. Commenter. You kept the fact he was a man a secret because you knew it would be an issue. YTA. OP. I live in a very liberal area and I've never heard my fiancé express any bigoted views. I wouldn't be in this relationship if I had. I wrongly assumed that it was a complete non-issue. Commenter. Even worse. So if your partner would not be okay with you being bisexual, then you'd qualify her as bigoted? You're full of yourself. Get help, and if you care about her, get away and don't hurt her more. P. She is okay with me being bisexual. The only thing she wasn't aware of was that my late fiancé was a man. But to answer your question, yes. I do think not dating someone simply on the grounds of their orientation is bigoted. But it does usually save me trouble when dating, because it helps weed people out. The STD argument lets me know they're ignorant, and then now I have to worry about girls and guys shows insecurity or some kind of inherent lack of trust. Commenter. Oof. Some of these comments are rough. Here's my perspective as a widow. You need to talk to your therapist about this. Not Reddit. Most people have no idea what it's like to lose so much and just how much that loss shapes you. But also, it's concerning to me that he sounds like such a big part of your internal life, but you've never even mentioned him with your current partner. Before you get married, you need to dig into why you've compartmentalized this to such an intense degree. Why are you hiding him? What are you afraid of? If I'm being generous, I think seeing that your late fiancé was a man shocked your fiancé into realizing that she knows absolutely nothing about this major part of you. OP, I really appreciate your comment. Thank you. It's very thoughtful. I don't think there's anything I'm necessarily scared of, but I am very protective of his memory. Sharing him with someone he didn't choose to share his story with kind of freaks me out in a way. I don't know. I'm aware that's irrational. Then there's the risk that the new partner would get tired of hearing about him or otherwise insecure about it, and that makes me really uncomfortable to think about too. So I guess I just keep him safe in me and my mind, and it protects me too. On if the fiancé was having an issue with the previous partner's gender. OP, because the gender issue is all she has fixated on, at least during our conversation. Also, it makes me uncomfortable to be with someone who is okay with my bisexuality in theory but not in practice. If the thought of me having cuddles or being romantic with a man in the past makes the other person insecure, I'm not really down for that. I come out to any potential romantic partners early on, so I thought I had already done my due diligence in that regard. I probably should have been more open, but I didn't anticipate that I needed to have a second coming out, where I admit that me saying I'm bisexual actually means I'm bisexual. Like, not just in the I like kissing dudes in bars kind of way, but in the romantic morning cuddles 6 years into a relationship way. Update 2. I figured I'd go ahead and post an update before I return to my all-lurk. No post/comment Reddit life. Yesterday, I had an emergency therapy session because I was spiraling and didn't feel prepared to tackle the upcoming conversation with my fiancé without one. It was hard but necessary as I was finally honest about just how much I was compartmentalizing my grief. It laid the foundation for where I'd like to go moving forward. Now I have to put in the legwork. The The few hours between my therapy appointment and my fiancé getting off work was evidence of just how avoidant I've become. It was a conversation we needed, but definitely not one I wanted. When we finally sat down to talk, I asked her to start us off by telling me exactly what was bothering her about the whole situation. She said because I had come out to her in a casual way, the way I come out to anyone, by mentioning it early on when it seems natural to bring up. She didn't realize how serious I was, and this made her look at me differently. She apologized for that and suggested that if I told her more about him now, it might be an easier pill for her to swallow. I tried, but there was this knot in my stomach the entire time I tried to pick a place to start. And maybe this is me being cruel, not giving her the benefit of the doubt, but it just didn't feel right. She hadn't come and said, "I was shocked because I realized how little I know about this time in your life. Would you be open to talking about it now?" Instead, it felt like, "Tell me what you saw in him so I can attempt to rationalize your orientation." I told her I needed some time, so she went to stay elsewhere for the weekend. A longtime good friend of mine came over this morning. I think the combination of anonymously talking more openly about my partner here, as well as being more open with my therapist, helped remind me of how joyous and cathartic it could be. I don't know the exact catalyst, but I do know I spilled my guts. We talked for hours about things I haven't told anyone in years. I expressed how nervous I was about possibly living alone again, and I was told that I didn't ever have to worry about that. That an SOS text message would be all it took for me to have company if I needed it. Same goes for all my friends and family. I'm so lucky I have an incredible support system. 5 minutes into that hours-long conversation, I already knew. The trust, security, and love I felt made room for this newfound openness. The absence of any one of those marks a relationship DOA, and is why I felt physically ill trying to share his memory with her. I truly wish her the best. I think going our separate ways will be good for both of us. We weren't getting what we needed from each other. She's supposed to be coming back tomorrow, so we'll have the talk then. I have lots of work to do, but for tonight, I get to be reminded of what safety feels like. Edit. Please see this comment where I elaborate on the conversation she and I had. There seems to be this misunderstanding where I blame her for everything because she didn't perfectly respond to the situation. Two things can be true. I wasn't open. I am largely accountable for the problems in this relationship, and I never should have entered it if I wasn't ready. She also said ignorant things. I'm not angry about it, and it's certainly not the sole reason we're breaking up. It's just another reason on the pile of reasons why this isn't sustainable. Me still not feeling comfortable enough to share with her equals me blaming her for everything, or even the majority. It was just the final nail in the coffin between, maybe we can make this work with a lot of effort, and, this needs to end now. Relevant comments. Commenter, you're human and you're grieving. You made mistakes, you're admitting to them, you're working through stuff. Just wanted to encourage you not to get too caught up in everyone here piling on. I get your concerns about possible biphobia, too. None of us were there in that conversation, and our opinions don't matter much anyway because we're not in your relationship. Go in peace. Best wishes for your continued healing and personal growth. OP, thank you sincerely. It can be easy to get so focused on what people are getting wrong that I get stuck doom scrolling. Haha. The conversation I had with her left me sick to my stomach and uncomfortable. I'm definitely not excusing the choices I made. This could have been rectified much earlier had I been open. But it seems like everyone here is just brushing off my experience of the discussion we had. One where I specifically opened the floor to explain why she freaked out so much about his gender. Her answers didn't strike me as something that would lead to either of us being happy long-term. Yeah. My nose has been in my phone long enough. Time to turn it off for the night and enjoy the real world. I appreciate you and your understanding. Commenter, you said you were extremely nervous before this conversation. Is it possible that you had predetermined that it would go badly and made a self-fulfilling prophecy out of your anxieties? Were your uncomfortable feelings caused by something concretely biphobic that she actually said, or by your own nerves which caused you to interpret anything she said in the worst possible light? Did you communicate this discomfort to her? Did you ask her how she was feeling? Is it possible your feelings could be the result of a clash between your avoidant nature and being forced to confront the problem? And her not having the perfect answers validated your feelings and desire to run. Again, grief sucks and it can warp our perspective of everyone else in our lives, including ourselves. I hope you have a good therapist and are committed to honesty and working on yourself. Is it possible that you had predetermined that it would go badly and made a self-fulfilling prophecy out of your anxieties? No, I was nervous, but I went in with an open mind. I knew I likely needed to end the relationship or at least pump the brakes, but that doesn't mean I went in guns blazing against her. I wasn't showing up in the way I needed to. We hadn't started planning the wedding yet, And I knew now that that would likely be much farther down the line than originally anticipated if things went well during our talk. I had a lot I needed to work through, and I didn't know if she would want to stay for that. Were your uncomfortable feelings caused by something concretely biphobic that she actually said, or by your own nerves, which caused you to interpret anything she said in the worst possible light? She said she didn't realize how serious I was about being bisexual when I had already come out to her. She also that made her look at me differently and apologized for that. To me, there's only one interpretation of that. I came out to her early on, but she didn't take my sexuality as fact until she saw me with a man, and now she looks at me differently. And despite just devoting a paragraph to that conversation, it was much longer than that in person. I asked her to elaborate, and she doubled down on what she said. She was apologizing to me for seeing me differently and asking me to share memories of my late fiancé to make this an easier pill to swallow. The pill to swallow wasn't my engagement, and it wasn't her lack of knowledge about it. The pill to swallow was, very specifically, the fact that she now saw me differently because I was in a serious, long-term relationship with a man. Did you communicate this discomfort to her? Did you ask her how she was feeling? Yes and yes. Like I said, long conversation where I opened the floor to her first and then asked clarifying questions. Is it possible your feelings could be the result of a clash between your avoidant nature and being forced to confront the problem? And her not having the perfect answers validated your feelings and desire to run. Again, I didn't need perfect answers. I've been imperfect all throughout this relationship. We're here because I've been avoidant and messy and human. I am at fault here big time for not being open from the start. And I extend grace to her for having to put up with that. I'm sorry I didn't have this conversation sooner, and that I jumped into something I wasn't ready for. What I needed was any shred of evidence that her problems with all of this stemmed from my lack of openness as opposed to him being a man suddenly forcing her to take my sexuality seriously. I didn't get that, and I'm not even really angry at her for that. I don't understand why people are acting like I'm being hostile towards her. We're just not compatible. That's another reason to add to the pile. I'm not going to go into our next conversation blaming her for everything. I am going to reiterate how it made me feel and encourage her to take bisexuality serious from the jump, though. But that's just one part of a much larger talk where I will take accountability and apologize for wasting her time when I couldn't give her all of me. Update 3. So the talk happened, and, well, it went differently than I expected. It's been a whirlwind, and I still don't know if my head's on straight, but I'm going to try and lay it all out here. First off, I wasn't prepared for how composed she was when she came back. I had geared myself up for either an emotional confrontation or maybe some final, angry words before we both agreed to part ways. Instead, she sat down calmly and started by apologizing. She said she'd spent the weekend reflecting, talking to a close friend of hers who's also bisexual, and trying to understand where her discomfort had come from. She admitted that the shock of realizing my ex was a man had thrown her. Not because of any inherent problem with bisexuality, but because she realized she had never fully grasped what my past meant. In her mind, I had always just been her boyfriend, and she hadn't truly considered what it meant for me to have had a different life, with a different person who happened to be a man. She said, and this is where things got really interesting, that her issue wasn't with my sexuality or even with my past relationship, but with the way I'd walled that part of myself off from her. She'd never felt excluded in our relationship until now, and it scared her. She said it wasn't about biphobia, but about feeling like there was a whole part of my life she wasn't a part of, a part that I wasn't willing to share. And I had to admit, she wasn't wrong. We went back and forth for a while, both of us airing things we'd been holding in. I told her about the knots in my stomach, how sick I felt trying to open up about him, how protective I was of his memory, and how that protectiveness had bled into my present. I admitted that I'd been unfair, keeping her at arm's length, even if I hadn't intended to. She acknowledged that she'd been insensitive, even if unintentionally, and that her initial reaction had come from a place of fear and ignorance. But here's the kicker. She asked if we could take a step back and try again. She said she wasn't ready to throw everything away without giving it a real shot. She wanted us to slow things down, maybe even put the engagement on hold, and just focus on getting to know each other again this time with no walls up. And I didn't know what to say. I still don't. On one hand, it's tempting. We've built something together, something that's been good, even if it's been flawed. The idea of taking a step back, of trying to rebuild trust, is appealing. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that wonders if it's too late. Have I already checked out emotionally? Is this just prolonging the inevitable? I told her I needed time to think. So that's where we left it. She's staying with a friend for a few days, giving me space to figure things out. And honestly, I'm torn. I don't want to lose someone who's been such a big part of my life these past few years. but I also don't know if I can undo the emotional damage that's been done. So here I am, sitting in an apartment that feels way too quiet without her, wondering if I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life by letting her go or by holding on. Update for, well, tomorrow came and it brought a lot. After I posted that last update, I spent the night doing exactly what I said I would: whine, TV, trying not to spiral. But, of course, the second I tried to sleep, my mind started racing. I kept replaying our conversation, going over every word, every look, every feeling of discomfort that had piled up over the past few months. I didn't sleep much, and when the sun came up, I still didn't have any answers. But then, something happened that I didn't expect. She showed up. It was early, like, not even 8 a.m., and there she was at my door. I opened it, still half asleep, and she looked just as exhausted as I felt. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. She just walked past me, dropped her bag on the couch and said, "I don't want to keep doing this." For a split second, I thought she was ending it right there. But then she kept talking. She said she didn't want to keep dragging this out, living in limbo, wondering if we were going to make it work or if we were just fooling ourselves. She said she'd spent the last few days going back and forth just like I had, and she'd come to a decision. She wanted to start over, not just slow down, not just put the engagement on hold. She wanted to actually start over, from scratch. Like, break up and see if we could find each other again without all the baggage. She said she still loved me, but she couldn't keep pretending that things were okay when they clearly weren't. And that if we were going to have any chance of being together, we needed to let go of everything that had happened and rebuild from the ground up. And you know what? That shook me. I didn't expect her to come to that conclusion, and I definitely didn't expect her to be so sure about it. But as much as it hurt to hear her say it, I knew she was right. We can't just patch things up and move on like nothing happened. We're both carrying too much, and trying to pretend otherwise is just setting us up for failure. So I told her I agreed. I told her I loved her, but I agreed. We spent the rest of the morning talking about what that actually meant. Like really talking. For the first time in what feels like forever, we were both brutally honest with each other. We talked about the future, about what we wanted from life, and most importantly about what we needed from each other. And in the end, we both realized that maybe we weren't as compatible as we thought. It was strange, sitting there and acknowledging that we might be better off apart. But at the same time, it was almost a relief. For the first time, I wasn't trying to force anything. I wasn't trying to protect her from my grief or hide parts of myself. And she wasn't trying to rationalize my past or make sense of her own feelings. We were just two people who had tried, but maybe didn't fit together as well as we'd hoped. When she left, it wasn't with anger or sadness. It was just acceptance. We hugged. She took her bag, and we both knew it was time. But here's the kicker, the really messed up part. As soon as she was gone, as soon as I was alone again, I felt this weird mix of freedom and panic. Like, I finally had what I wanted, space to figure things out. But at the same time, I was terrified. What if I made the wrong choice? What if this was all just my grief screwing with me, making me push away the one person who could actually make me happy again? I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself, but nothing worked. So, naturally, I reached out to the one person who's been there for me through all of this, my therapist. I booked another emergency session, and we spent an hour untangling everything that had happened. She reminded me that it's okay to feel conflicted, that grief isn't linear, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is let go of what isn't serving us anymore. And that's where I'm at now. I'm trying to let go. I'm trying to move forward. But damn, it's hard. The weirdest part? I keep thinking about my late fiancé. Not in the way I used to, where his memory felt like a comforting presence, but in a new way. Like, what would he say if he saw me now? Would he be proud of the person I've become? Or would he tell me I'm making all the wrong moves? I don't know, and maybe I'll never know, but it's something I can't seem to shake. So that's it. We're done. I'm single again, and for the first time in a long time, I have no idea what comes next. It's scary, but maybe that's exactly what I need right now, a little bit of fear, a little bit of uncertainty, and a lot of space to figure out who the hell I am without anyone else defining me. I don't know if there will be another update. Maybe there will, maybe there won't. But for now, I'm just going to take things one day at a time. Maybe that's all any of us can do.